I never thought a simple favor could turn my life upside down. But here I am, sitting in my quiet living room, heart racing, staring at a message on my phone that makes me feel like the ground beneath me just disappeared. My name is Linda. I'm 42, and I've always tried to live a calm, predictable life. I like my routines, my quiet weekends, and honestly, I never imagined that family could surprise me in ways that leave me questioning everything. It all started last Thursday. My daughter, Emily, had gone on a business trip, leaving her husband, my son-in-law, Jake, in town for the week. Jake is 20 years younger than me, if I'm honest, and has always been a bit unpredictable. Charming, funny, easy to talk to, but with a streak of restlessness that makes you never quite know what he'll do next. Most of the time, it's harmless. But that day, his request was anything but. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the rare quiet, when Jake knocked on the door. He looked a little nervous, which is unusual for him. Normally, he bursts in with a joke or a story, like he owns the place. Today, though, there was something in his eyes that made me pause. "Hey, Linda," he said, voice hesitant. "Can I ask you for a favor?" At first, I thought it would be something simple. Pick up something from the store, watch the dog, or maybe lend a hand with one of his odd little projects. But when he leaned closer and lowered his voice, I could tell this wasn't ordinary. The way he said it, so careful, almost secretive, made my stomach twist. "You know I'd do anything for you," I said, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. "Of course. What is it?" Jake took a deep breath. "I need your help with something personal. Something complicated." That's when the tiny knot of worry in my chest started to grow. I should have said no, maybe even walked away. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of desperate hope, that made it impossible. Something told me that agreeing would change everything. I didn't know it at the time, but that single decision, the choice to say yes, would pull me into a world I never expected. A world of secrets, tension, and decisions that would test the very boundaries of trust and family. I should have sensed it, the way a quiet alarm goes off when danger is near. But instead, I smiled, nodded, and said, "Okay, I'll help." And just like that, my ordinary life began to unravel. I still remember the look on Jake's face when I said yes. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. And in that instant, I realized I might have opened a door I could never close. What exactly did he need from me? And why did it feel like saying yes had already started a chain of events I wasn't ready for? That's when the first unexpected twist hit, and it changed everything. Before that day, life had been normal, or as close to normal as a family with grown kids can get. Emily, my daughter, is organized, ambitious, and careful in ways that often make me proud and sometimes frustrated. She's always been the kind of person who plans everything to the letter, from her meetings to her weekend errands. Jake, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. 20 years younger, spontaneous to a fault, and with a charm that seems to get him out of situations that would trip anyone else up. It's a strange dynamic, watching them together, her careful precision balancing his restless energy, but somehow, it worked, or at least, it seemed to. Jake has always had a way of sliding into our lives effortlessly. He'd show up at the house with a grin and some ridiculous story about his latest adventure or minor disaster at work. I admired him in a way I didn't expect, a young man who could make people laugh and still keep secrets. But beneath that charm, there was always a hint of something unpredictable, something that made you wonder if the calm surface ever really held. That Thursday, though, something felt different. Not just his nervousness, but the way he avoided eye contact at first, fiddling with the sleeve of his shirt as he explained his favor. It was personal, he said. Complicated. I couldn't tell if he was exaggerating or if the weight in his voice was real. And honestly, I didn't know if I should ask more questions or just trust him like I always had. I knew I was stepping into unfamiliar territory, but family makes you take risks sometimes, doesn't it? Helping a son-in-law isn't something I thought would ever test me emotionally or morally. And yet, as I listened to him outline the favor, my mind raced. Every instinct I had, practical, protective, cautious, was screaming at me to pause. But another part, the part that had always been drawn to helping others, told me to go ahead. The living room felt unusually silent after he spoke. The kind of silence that hangs heavy in the air, like it's waiting for something to happen. Outside, the trees swayed in the wind, but inside, time seemed to slow. I realized then how little I truly knew about what Jake was dealing with, or how it might affect all of us. Emily, unaware on her trip, trusted both of us to handle things. And here I was, about to step into a situation I didn't fully understand, all because of one request. I found myself thinking back on the past months, small oddities I had brushed off. The late-night phone calls, the fleeting worried glances, the sudden trips he claimed were just errands. None of it had made sense before, but now, looking at him sitting across from me, I could feel the pieces starting to fit together, though the picture they formed was still unclear, and it made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask more, but a strange unease held my tongue. There was something he wasn't saying, something buried under that charming, nervous exterior. And even as I nodded and agreed to help, a quiet fear whispered in the back of my mind. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. I didn't know it then, but that favor would soon pull me into a maze of secrets, decisions, and consequences that I never imagined. And just as I began to take my first step into it, I realized something that made my heart stop. What Jake needed from me might be far bigger than I could handle. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I kept replaying Jake's words over and over in my head, trying to figure out what exactly I had agreed to. He had explained just enough to draw me in, but not enough for me to feel fully prepared. That's when I realized how little control I really had. When Jake arrived, he brought with him an urgency that I hadn't seen before. His usual grin was gone, replaced by a tension that made his shoulders stiff. "Linda," he began, "I know this is a lot, but I really need you to be careful. No one can know about this. Not Emily, not anyone." His voice was low, almost shaking, and I could tell that whatever he was about to ask could change everything. I nodded, trying to steady my own racing thoughts. My mind scrambled with questions. Why couldn't Emily know? What danger, or embarrassment, was involved? Why was he turning to me, of all people, for this? I had always thought I knew him, at least well enough to predict his moods or sense when he was serious. But this was new. Jake handed me a small envelope, and my hands trembled as I took it. Inside were documents I didn't understand and instructions that seemed simple on the surface but carried an unspoken weight. Every step he outlined seemed ordinary enough, yet my gut screamed that it wasn't. The air between us grew heavier with every word, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I tried to process the information logically, but confusion and fear mingled in a way I couldn't separate. I realized that by agreeing to help, I had stepped into a situation that was morally gray, risky, and possibly illegal. And yet, looking at Jake, I couldn't refuse. The look in his eyes, an almost desperate trust, made it impossible. As I prepared to follow his instructions, a creeping thought unsettled me more than anything. What if this favor was bigger than either of us realized? What if it was the kind of thing that could ruin lives, or worse, destroy the trust one had built with my daughter? I felt trapped between loyalty, fear, and the urge to protect my family, yet unsure how far I could push myself before it all spiraled out of control. And then, just as I was about to take the first step, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting in a way that made my blood run cold. "Linda, we have a problem," he whispered. I didn't need him to say more. Jake's words hung in the air like a warning siren, but the problem wasn't clear. My pulse quickened as I watched him pace, phone pressed to his ear, muttering under his breath. Something had gone wrong, something serious, and I felt the walls of our living room close in, as if the very space around us knew we were on the edge of disaster. For hours, we worked in silence, the kind of tense silence that screams louder than words. Every glance at the envelope, every step of the instructions, felt like walking on a tightrope over a dark abyss. I kept thinking about Emily, blissfully unaware on her trip, trusting us to handle things. The thought made my chest tighten. One wrong move, one slip, and I could shatter everything she believed about her life, her marriage, even me. Jake was different now. He seemed almost fragile, like a mask had slipped and revealed the weight he had been carrying. Normally full of bravado, he now looked small, unsure, and entirely human. I could see his hands shake when he passed me documents, the kind of subtle tremor that makes you realize fear can be contagious. I wanted to say something, to reassure him, but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure whether I could reassure him or myself. As the day wore on, Tiny incidents started piling up. A knock on the door that made me jump, the sound of a car slowing outside the driveway, the feeling of being watched, even though it was probably just nerves. Every instinct screamed that we weren't alone, that someone, or something, was aware of what we were doing. My mind raced. What if Emily found out? What if someone else did? And the thought that made my stomach churn the most, what if Jake had miscalculated? What if this favor, simple as he made it sound, had consequences we couldn't imagine? I remember one moment vividly. Jake stepping back, looking at me with a strange intensity, whispering, "Linda." I didn't think it would go this far. His eyes were wide, almost pleading, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt, not about helping him, but about whether we could survive the fallout. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words refused to come. Then it happened, a series of small, seemingly insignificant events that, taken together, made my heart stop. The doorbell rang again, insistently. I hadn't heard the car leave. Jake's phone vibrated, a message flashing on the screen that he didn't show me. And then, in a split second, I realized something chilling. We were not just following instructions anymore. Something, or someone, was watching, waiting for a single mistake, a single slip. I glanced at Jake, expecting an explanation, a plan, reassurance. But the look in his eyes froze me in place. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something I couldn't name. And in that instant, I knew. The favor I agreed to help with, it was no longer just a favor. It had become a trap. Before I could even react, Jake's phone buzzed again. This time, the message alone was enough to make me step back, my blood running cold. The moment I had been dreading had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Jake's phone buzzed again, and this time, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at the screen. My eyes went wide. The message wasn't from a stranger or an unknown number. It was from Emily. "She knows," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. My heart stopped. She found out about the documents. She's on her way home. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. My daughter, trusting and unsuspecting, was about to walk into a storm neither of us had fully prepared for. And the worst part? It wasn't just Emily who was involved anymore. Another name flashed on the screen. A person from Jake's past. Someone he had promised never to contact. Someone who clearly had a stake in this situation. Jake's face drained of color. I thought I handled everything, but I didn't. They know everything. And now, it's not just about the favor anymore. It's about who survives this. I swallowed hard, feeling panic claw at my chest. What had started as a simple request, a small favor for my son-in-law, had exploded into something uncontrollable, something that could destroy not just relationships, but lives. And in that instant, I realized, nothing about this would ever go back to the way it was. Not ever. By the time Emily's car pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Jake and I exchanged a glance, one filled with dread, regret, and an unspoken question. Could we fix this before it was too late? Emily stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the room. "Linda." "Jake." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that made me flinch. "I saw the messages. I know what's going on." For a moment, everything froze. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Jake stepped forward, trying to explain, to justify, but Emily held up her hand. "Stop. I need to understand, but I'm listening. Both of you. Right now." We spent the next tense minutes laying everything out, the favor, the documents, the mistakes, and the hidden risks. Emily's eyes never left ours, her face a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and determination. And then, just as I thought she might be able to forgive or at least grasp the situation, she dropped the bombshell. "I already called my lawyer," she said quietly, "and I've involved the authorities. This, whatever this is, it stops here. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now." Jake's face fell. He looked at me, panic-stricken, realizing the chain reaction of choices had spun completely out of control. I felt a mixture of relief and fear. The situation was being handled, but in a way none of us had expected. Then came the final twist. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. "It's him. The person from Jake's past. He knows we're onto him. He's coming. And he's not alone." A chill ran down my spine. The favor that had seemed small and personal had escalated into something much darker. The person we thought we could avoid was now on their way, and there was no telling what they would do. In that instant, everything shifted. Trust, fear, loyalty, all tangled together. I realized that even with Emily back, even with authority involved, the danger wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And as we all exchanged terrified glances, the sound of a car door slamming outside made it clear. The real test of survival, and of who we truly are, was only just beginning. The sound of footsteps outside made us freeze for a moment, but when we looked through the window, we saw the approaching figure, only to realize it wasn't the threat we feared. It was Emily, returning from the airport with a calm determination that immediately shifted the tension in the room. The authorities she had contacted were already on the scene, ensuring that Jake's past mistakes couldn't cause any further harm. Jake slumped against the wall, relief washing over him in a way I hadn't seen before. For the first time, he admitted the full weight of what had happened, how he'd underestimated the situation, how a favor that seemed small had spiraled into something dangerous. His voice cracked as he apologized, not just to me, but to Emily, acknowledging that trust is fragile and once shaken, it can take time to rebuild. Emily, ever the grounded presence, listened quietly. Her disappointment was there, but so was her compassion. She reminded us that mistakes don't define a person, but actions and accountability do. Together, we faced the consequences, took steps to fix what could be fixed, and, importantly, learned the importance of honesty, timing, and trust. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of us sat in the living room, tired, worn, but strangely closer than before. The favor, once a source of fear and confusion, had become a lesson in resilience and family. Jake and I shared a silent understanding. Our bond had changed, grown deeper, but it was now tempered with caution. Emily's presence reminded us all of the value of transparency and the strength it brings. Yet, even as we breathed a sigh of relief, a small, uneasy thought lingered. Jake's past might have been contained for now, but life has a way of presenting challenges when you least expect them. The experience left me with a strange mix of emotions: fear, relief, frustration, and gratitude. I realized that life is rarely predictable, and sometimes, the people we think we know best can surprise us in ways that test every part of us. As I closed the door for the night, I looked at Jake and then at Emily, feeling a deep sense of connection. We had survived something that could have torn us apart. The favor that seemed so minor had forced us to confront our own weaknesses, our limits, and the fragility of trust. And as I turned off the lights, a quiet thought whispered in my mind. Life will always throw unexpected favors and challenges our way. The key isn't avoiding them, but facing them with courage, honesty, and a little bit of faith that, somehow, we'll make it through. Some doors, once opened, change everything. But it's how we step through them that defines who we are.